You know what no one ever tells you about divorce? Your ex-wife is about to step into a psychological minefield she spent years convincing herself wasn't there. And this isn't some cheap karma story where she suddenly realizes what she lost and comes running back. No, this is far more complex and far more brutal. It's about what happens when someone abandons certainty for a fantasy and then has to watch that fantasy collapse piece by piece. Picture this while you're listening. There are countless men sitting alone in quiet apartments, scrolling through their ex-wife's social media, seeing posts about new chapters and living my truth, and convincing themselves she's out there thriving while they're barely holding it together. But what's really happening behind those filters and captions is something very different. She's heading straight toward a reality so jarring that her mind will have to rewire itself just to survive the contradiction. When a woman leaves a long marriage, she isn't just leaving a man. She's abandoning an entire psychological system she doesn't even realize she depends on. For years, you were her reference point. Every decision, every emotion, every future plan had you somewhere in the background. Even when she complained about you to friends, you were still the center of her mental world. And now she's drifting without gravity, telling herself that floating is freedom. But let's break down what actually happens next, because the pattern is so consistent, it's almost clinical. The first stage is what you could call the self-honeymoon. It usually lasts anywhere from a couple of weeks to a few months. She's riding the high of her decision. Every morning, she wakes up feeling proud of herself for being brave, strong, independent. She changes her environment, redecorates, joins a yoga class, starts journaling, maybe downloads a dating app just to look. Her friends flood her with praise. You look amazing. You're glowing. You finally chose yourself. And she absorbs every word of it. During this phase, she isn't living in reality. She's living inside a story she's telling herself about reality. A story where she's the heroine who escaped a dull life and now has endless possibilities ahead of her. Her phone buzzes with matches and messages. Men she hasn't interacted with in years suddenly want her attention. She interprets this as proof she made the right choice. What she doesn't understand is that she's confusing attention with intention, novelty with value, and volume with meaning. Then the second phase arrives, quietly and slowly, like a car crash in slow motion. It begins with small moments. Her first serious date after the divorce. On paper, the man looks ideal, attractive, accomplished, confident, says the right things. Dinner goes well, drinks follow, everything feels promising. And then, at the end of the night, something shifts. She realizes something that hits her hard and cold. This man doesn't actually care about her. He doesn't know her fears, her habits, her insecurities. He doesn't know the small things that made her feel safe. To him, she's an evening, a moment. And that's when the first fracture forms in the story she's been telling herself. But she doesn't stop. She can't. Doubt at this point would mean questioning the entire decision, and that's psychologically unbearable. So she pushes forward. More dates, more nights out, more distractions. But something has changed. The attention doesn't feel as intoxicating anymore. The compliments sound rehearsed. She starts noticing patterns. How these men speak about their ex-wives, how they treat service staff, how quickly things turn physical. And without realizing it, she starts comparing them to you. Not consciously. On the surface, she still insists you were the problem. But beneath that, her mind is doing what it always does, comparing what's familiar with what's new. One man seems charming, but constantly talks over her. Another has money but no emotional depth. Another is exciting but reckless and unreliable. And with every comparison, you look better in hindsight. Not because you were perfect, but because you were known, you were stable, you were home. Then comes the third phase, and this is where anxiety sets in. It usually hits somewhere around 6 to 8 months after the separation. The novelty is gone. Her friends are tired of hearing dating stories. If there are children, they're acting out, confused and unsettled. And she's exhausted from performing happiness. Because that's what it is now. A performance. Every smiling photo takes effort. Every public appearance feels heavy. She's playing a role she no longer understands. the panic shows up in different ways. Some women become frantic, constantly busy, filling every moment with activity so they don't have to sit alone with their thoughts. Others shut down completely, spending weekends in bed, scrolling through old memories, replaying conversations, trying to pinpoint where everything went wrong. But they all share one thing. They begin to rewrite the past. The marriage that was supposedly unbearable suddenly doesn't seem so terrible. The man she couldn't tolerate becomes someone she might have misjudged. The future she felt so confident about starts to look uncertain. And here's where the psychology deepens. She can't simply admit she made a mistake. That would shatter the identity she built around leaving. Her social image, her self-concept, her sense of pride are all tied to the idea that walking away was the right thing to do. So instead of admitting error, she creates a new narrative. One where maybe you've changed, maybe you've grown, maybe circumstances are different now. This allows her to imagine reconciliation without admitting she was wrong. At the same time, the dating reality becomes harder to ignore. The pool she's navigating isn't what she expected. The men showing interest tend to fall into predictable categories. Some are opportunists who sense vulnerability. Some are married and conveniently forget to mention it. Some are perpetually single for reasons that soon become obvious. And the genuinely solid men? They're usually taken or have options. And she's competing with women who don't carry the weight of divorce and shared history. Slowly, a frightening realization sets in. The value she believed she had in the dating market doesn't exist the way she imagined. Dating app matches are illusions. Compliments are mass-produced. Chemistry isn't exclusive. The economics of post-divorce dating hit hard. She isn't special in this space. She's one profile among thousands. And then comes the reckoning. Usually around a year in, sometimes later, this is when the mental defenses finally collapse. The story she's been telling herself can't be maintained anymore. The loneliness becomes overwhelming. Not the kind where you simply want company, but the kind where you realize you dismantled a real life for an idea that was never real. It hits late at night, after another empty weekend, after the kids are gone, after another disappointing interaction. The realization lands all at once. What she gave up, what can't be undone, and how irreversible it all is. The weight of that truth is so heavy that some women can't emotionally process it. Their minds shut down feelings just to survive. And this is when the late-night messages begin, usually after midnight, casual on the surface. "Hey, how are you?" Or, "I was just thinking about that time we—" But underneath, the message is simple. She's drowning, and you're the last solid ground she remembers. Sometimes the messages are angry because anger is easier than regret. Sometimes they're nostalgic, testing if a connection still exists. But they all mean the same thing. The grass wasn't greener, it was artificial. And during all of this, her mind is locked in a state of cognitive conflict that's actually changing how her brain functions. Every day, she's forced to hold two opposing beliefs at once. Leaving was the right decision, and everything feels worse now. Maintaining that contradiction is exhausting. It disrupts sleep, appetite, focus. Anxiety increases. Depression settles in. Emotional numbness becomes a defense. Feeling too much would mean confronting the truth. There's a phenomenon many experience during this period. Sunday nights. That's when it hits hardest. The distractions are gone. The week is about to begin. The performance ends. And in that quiet space, usually just before sleep, the truth creeps in. She isn't empowered. She isn't free. She's alone. And while she's reaching that quiet realization, something else is happening that feels cruel in its timing. You're starting to heal. You've already been through the shock, the anger, the grief. Men process separation differently. We internalize, compartmentalize, and then we rebuild. We don't talk our way out of pain. We work our way out of it. We focus on structure, routine, action. So by the time she begins to feel the full weight of what she's lost, you've started becoming someone new. Someone calmer, someone stronger, someone more grounded. Ironically, closer to the man she always claimed she wanted you to be. And this creates a psychological prison for her. She can see the version of you she once demanded, but she can't access it. You became that man without her, because of losing her. And knowing that she was the catalyst for your growth but won't benefit from it is a particular kind of torment. It keeps her awake at night. Now let's look at what's happening in her social world, because this part is rarely talked about. At first, her friends surround her. They reassure her. They validate her decision. They help reinforce the idea that leaving was brave and necessary. But over time, things shift. Her married friends begin to pull away, not intentionally, but instinctively. She becomes a reminder that marriages can fail, a single woman who disrupts the comfort of their own stability. Invitations slow down, couple dinners disappear, conversations move on without her. The single friends she thought would become her new tribe turn into competition. They're all navigating the same limited dating pool, and survival quietly replaces solidarity. She's not truly single like them anyway. She has history, baggage, children maybe. She occupies a strange middle space that doesn't fully belong anywhere. And slowly, her social circle shrinks. The network she relied on reveals itself to be temporary and conditional. And that's when another truth settles in. You weren't just her husband. You were her closest friend. Her emergency contact, her default companion, her sense of safety. And she gave all of that up, chasing the belief that something better was waiting. There's a psychological phenomenon many divorced women experience that almost no one talks about. It's similar to phantom limb syndrome. Just as amputees feel a limb that's no longer there, women feel a relationship that no longer exists. She'll catch herself wanting to tell you something funny, then remember you're gone. She'll hear your voice in her head commenting on everyday moments. She'll wake up briefly forgetting the separation, only to relive the loss all over again. This isn't romantic longing, it's neurological conditioning. Her brain spent years wiring itself around your presence. Those pathways don't vanish overnight, and life has a way of reinforcing this. A song you loved plays unexpectedly. She finds one of your old shirts. One of the kids repeats something you used to say. She visits a place you enjoyed and realizes how empty it feels without someone to share it with. These aren't just memories. They're anchors pulling her back to a reality she's been trying to avoid. And then there's the numbers, the math she can't escape. If she's mid-30s or older, divorced, possibly with children, looking for a man who is single, emotionally available, financially stable, attracted to her, and willing to take on another man's family, the odds are unforgiving. Add standards that haven't adjusted to her new situation, and the probability becomes brutal. But she can't admit this, not publicly and not privately. So she adapts in ways that slowly erode her self-respect. She lowers standards while telling herself she's being flexible. She accepts behavior she once would have rejected and calls it maturity. She tolerates disrespect and reframes it as not being dramatic. Each compromise chips away at her confidence, but acknowledging a catastrophic miscalculation would be far worse. Some women enter a phase of frantic self-reinvention. New hair, new body, new style, new attitude. Not growth, but desperation. It's an attempt to become someone more competitive in this new environment. But it's cosmetic. The problem isn't how she looks, it's that she fundamentally misjudged what she gave up versus what was available. Others rush into rebound relationships and try to force them into something serious. They meet someone who shows interest and immediately attempt to recreate the structure they lost. They involve the kids too quickly. They push commitment before trust exists. They ignore warning signs because being with the wrong person feels less terrifying than being alone. These relationships always collapse. And when they do, they leave deeper damage than before. Through all of this, you remain a silent presence, not because you're doing anything, but because you're the benchmark. Every man is measured against you, not the real you, but the idealized version regret creates. A version polished by hindsight. A ghost no one can compete with. And eventually, usually around the 2-year mark, she reaches a crossroads. She can face the truth and attempt to make amends, or she can harden herself and double down on the lie. Most choose the second path. It's easier. They grow bitter, cynical. They surround themselves with voices that reinforce their decision. They become the ones encouraging other unhappy women to leave, not because it's right, but because shared regret needs validation. The women who choose honesty face a different burden. How do you approach someone you hurt deeply? How do you admit you were wrong when your identity is built on being right? How do you ask for forgiveness when you're not sure it will be given? That weight crushes many of them. Some say the hardest part wasn't leaving, it was realizing they shouldn't have. And there's another layer beneath all of this that's rarely discussed. When a woman leaves a long marriage, she doesn't just lose a partner, she loses an identity. For years, she wasn't just herself, she was part of a unit. Every choice, from daily routines to life plans, was shaped by that role. Her neural patterns formed around being a wife. When she leaves, she isn't just alone, she's undefined. And that identity collapse creates a psychological vacuum most people aren't prepared for. The smallest decisions suddenly feel overwhelming. Which side of the bed to sleep on? What to watch without compromise? Where to eat when every option highlights solitude? These seem insignificant, but they accumulate. A slow, relentless erosion. And the truth she rarely admits, even to herself, settles in. What she lost wasn't perfect, but it was real. And what she chased was an idea that never existed. This is the stage where the pain becomes quiet, but permanent. Not dramatic, not loud, just constant. She learns how to function around it. She goes to work. She smiles when required. She posts normal photos. But underneath, there's a dull awareness that never fully leaves. The kind that sits in the chest and tightens when the world slows down. Nights are the hardest, especially the ones with no distractions. She lies awake replaying decisions, conversations, moments where things could have turned differently. Not because she's romanticizing the past, but because her mind is searching for a version of events where the outcome isn't this. And the cruel part is that there isn't one. The door she closed doesn't reopen the way she imagined. Time moves forward, but the regret doesn't dissolve. It hardens. She begins to understand that some choices don't come with lessons, they come with consequences, and consequences don't negotiate. Over time, she becomes more guarded, less open, not because she wants to be, but because vulnerability now feels dangerous. Every new connection is filtered through disappointment. Trust becomes conditional. Hope becomes something she manages carefully, in small doses, so it doesn't hurt too much when it disappears. She tells herself she's wiser now, more experienced, but the truth is, she's more afraid. Afraid of investing again, afraid of being wrong again, afraid of admitting that the future she imagined no longer exists. And while she's learning to live with that weight, life continues to present reminders. Friends move forward, families grow, milestones pass without her, not all at once, but gradually. Quiet gaps where something should have been. Moments where she realizes she's no longer at the center of anyone's long-term plans. And that realization stings more than loneliness. It's the awareness of being optional, replaceable, peripheral. The world doesn't stop, but it doesn't wait either. Eventually, she accepts a version of reality she once would have rejected outright. She adjusts expectations downward. She reframes absence as independence. She convinces herself that needing less is a form of strength. But deep down, she knows the difference between adaptation and fulfillment. She isn't whole, she's coping. There's a subtle shift that happens as years pass. The anger fades, the sadness dulls. What remains is something heavier. Resignation, not bitterness, not rage, just a quiet understanding that the life she dismantled won't be rebuilt the same way. And that understanding settles into her identity. She becomes someone who survived a decision rather than someone who benefited from it. Meanwhile, you continue forward. Not in triumph, not in revenge, just in motion. You've learned. You've refined yourself. You've created stability from disruption. And without trying to, you've become evidence of something she can't escape, that growth didn't require her absence, but it was triggered by it. That realization stays with her, not as longing, but as awareness. And awareness is the hardest thing to live with, because it doesn't fade. It doesn't demand attention. It just exists. A constant reminder that what was traded wasn't equal, that what was given up was real, and what was pursued was imagined. She may never say this out loud. She may never admit it publicly. She may never fully articulate it even to herself. But it's there, underneath everything. A quiet truth that surfaces in still moments and retreats when the world gets loud again. The understanding that some losses don't announce themselves immediately. They reveal themselves slowly, over years, through absence rather than impact. And that's the part no one talks about. Divorce doesn't always explode. Sometimes it erodes, and by the time you realize what's missing, the space it occupied has already grown cold. If this hit something you felt but never heard put into words, you're not alone. Leave a comment and say what part resonated most with you. This isn't about blame, it's about understanding what really happens after the choice is made. If you value honest conversations about relationships, psychology, and the consequence, people don't talk about, subscribe. New videos every week.